Hello. Today we have a different style of video. These are the matchup report cards. I love doing these, breaking down the matchups piece by piece to see how good is it really. Well, 15 today. So starting at running back, DeAndre Swift versus the Giants. What these mean is it's the adjusted defensive rank versus the ground for running backs. How good are the Giants on the ground against fantasy points for running backs? And then the receiving running back, same thing. Giants, they're 23rd. That offense and defensive line advantage, how good is it compared to all the other teams? The Bears have the best offensive line advantage on the week. That explosive run percentage, how often are the Giants allowing those explosive carries? That opposing pace, so the Giants offense, how fast are they moving? The team total, they're just the Bears projected points, the spread, and is that running back playing at home? So this is what you want it to look like, just all green. These are not how all the cards look, but it gives DeAndre Swift that subjective A. I would say. It's a big week for him. He's coming back. The big question of the week is just how much does Monangai eat into that? If Swift misses this game, well, then Monangai set up extremely well. He had, 30 opportunities, close to it last week. Since this bye week, the Bears have getting a lot of work to these running backs. 30 opportunities per game since that bye. I think that it'll be closer to 60-40, which is fine. It's kind of what it was before Monangai had that start. Like if we look at the 3 games before that, Swift had 62% of those RB touches. Monangai had 35%, and that was plenty fine for Swift. It led him to 16 touches, 20 points per game. It might not be that perfect, but I don't think it's going to explode. 60% of the touches for this team is fine for him, especially with the type of player that he is, the work that he is getting in terms of the receiving. And in this matchup, it's amazing. The Giants are allowing 6 yards per carry. It is by far the last in the NFL right now. Close to 6 yards. It's 5.9 technically. But we'll look through this like Swift, especially those explosive runs matter. The receiving matters. That offensive line has been playing amazing. So overall, it's an A for me for Swift. The opposite of that, I would say, is sadly Breece Hall. Off the bye week, it has not been improving, especially if Justin Fields plays in this game. That's the worry. He's the only guy on the team that didn't get traded, it seems like. So that pace of play for the Browns, that helps. They're playing at home. Outside of that, everything is horrible. Like the Browns, they are 4th best on the ground against the running backs. They're number 1 against receiving. And that is with the Browns not really winning as many games. So usually, we'll see later a team that if they are losing this bad, then that ground production for fantasy running backs will be really good on the opposite side. The Browns defense is so good on the ground that they are still 4th best despite winning 2 games, I think, this year. So overall for Breece Hall, it does not give me too much confidence. If he doesn't break a super long touchdown, you're probably not getting much. The receiving has been low with Justin Fields in there. So unless Tyrod Taylor goes in there, wouldn't expect too much from Breece this week. This next one that I alluded to just now is in terms of this Saints matchup at running back. Because when we look at Rico Dowdle, it's an A minus. We're looking at 28th in terms of the production on the ground that the Saints are giving up. And yet they are 3rd best in EPA per play on the ground this year. So they actually have a really good run defense. It's just one, they play it in the same pace on the offensive side. So opposing offenses are getting more work. So Rico Dowdle and the Panthers should be, getting their fair share of plays in this game. And eventually, when you're losing games and teams are running on you a ton, you'll eventually score. So in terms of Dowdle in these wins, he's had 3 starts. They won all 3 games. I don't know how correlated that is, but when it does happen, which I would expect, they're 5.5-point favorites at home. You'd expect them to win this game. In those 3 starts, they've all won, and he's averaging 26 carries per game. So, 26 carries per game. He had 30 touches in one of those. I wouldn't be shocked if he had 30 touches again in this game. Just a great offense to be a part of as a running back when you are getting the volume, and right now he is. Another guy I want to look at is Travis Etienne versus the Houston Texans. There's a couple things to look at here. One is he has already played this Texans team. And it doesn't give me too much confidence because obviously you see this, like the numbers are not the greatest. There is one positive, and that is the Texans defense at the goal line has actually not been the greatest in terms of facing the run. So good run defense, great defense overall, but they're 29th at the goal line. Etienne scored the last time he played. Hasn't happened too much this year, but the reason that I don't love it is because he scored last time and he still had 11 points. So still not too much to be happy about. You see, we're good against receiving running backs. Etienne, 0 receptions when he played him in week 3, 16 carries, 56 yards. I would expect more of the same. So you're kind of banking on that touchdown. You're hoping that he gets a little bit of receiving, especially with these injured wide receivers. But I'm not overly confident in this matchup for Etienne. And then one more running back here, a flyer, Aaron Jones. The volume hasn't really been there, but they are run heavy with McCarthy, and he's going to get the large majority of that receiving. And that's the key here. Baltimore, they are dead last against receiving running backs this year. Not great against running backs in general, as you see on the ground as well. They're at home. McCarthy's getting another game. They go from one of the pass heaviest teams, top 5, to bottom 5 when McCarthy is in there. So I think he can get enough work in this game where it's been basically 50-50. He's had 50% of the carries the last couple weeks, and that receiving is largely his. So with the good matchup, it makes him playable. You have some hope there, especially through the air. A couple quarterbacks hit on real quick, very similar in terms of what we're looking at here. Defenses against the pass, defenses versus rushing quarterbacks. The pressure is the one kind of difference, and then explosives, opponent pace, team total, spread, those sort of things. When we're looking at this one, Caleb Williams versus the Giants, I do like it. He has been very hit or miss and very matchup dependent, so I feel like it's an important one to look at. The key here is Caleb Williams has been a lot better as a fantasy quarterback, especially, but just NFL quarterback too, against man coverage this year, both through the air, but also helps out his scrambling ability a bit. And the Giants play the most man coverage in the NFL, and they stick to it. In the past, when there's other times where they maybe could be playing a little bit more zone to help him out against quarterbacks like, say, Jalen Hurts, who's also really good against man, they haven't really changed much. So I'd expect them to be the same defense. And when Caleb Williams is playing against man coverage, that points per drop back is about 40% better. So I do like the potential here in this matchup for him to have a better day than normal. Maybe not, the quarterback 1 overall that he was last week, but also hopefully not the quarterback 29 or whatever he was the 2 weeks before that. Daniel Jones has an interesting one against Atlanta, who's had a couple off weeks. They were like the number 1 passing defense, and then a couple bad games. They're still pretty good, 7th best against the passing for fantasy quarterbacks. They're also 4th on the ground, which is, Daniel Jones has some value there. That team total is what's always encouraging with the Colts. They're projected to score a lot of points, even against an Atlanta defense that is pretty good overall. But they've allowed 6 passing touchdowns over these past 2 games. We saw 2 have 4 touchdowns against them. We saw last week Drake May, pretty solid game overall. So Daniel Jones, he's playable, even though it's not the greatest spot in the world. The worry for me here is how much do they just rely on the run? Because the Atlanta run defense, more middle of the road. And after last week taking that loss, Jonathan Taylor has his first bad game, really. I would expect them to come out and run the ball a lot, which makes me hesitant on Daniel Jones. I think it's one of those games where his fantasy production or his fantasy day might rely on, does he get that 1-yard quarterback sneak for a touchdown or not? Sticking in this matchup, like I said, I'm guessing it's going to be a little bit run heavy, but Pittman, it's an interesting one for him. 17th against receivers, but he's going to get AJ Terrell on him about half the time. I'd say it's a little bit more difficult of a matchup than the 17th would suggest. So that's not ideal, but the main thing here is the coverage for the Falcons. They run a ton of one-high safeties. They love cover 3, more than anybody in the NFL, over 50% of plays. And Pittman, sadly, that's his weakness. So you're most likely going to see his production coming elsewhere. When we're looking just on a fantasy points per route basis, Pierce is actually 2 times better than Pittman this year against cover 3, just because of how they're exploited and used. Pierce, that downfield receiver, favors him a little bit more on those deep shots against cover 3, with Pittman not as much. So that's just not been his coverage this year, and is what we'd expect with how they use him with Daniel Jones, a lot of those short area targets, all that good stuff. It doesn't mean that I would start Pierce over Pittman, but I'm just saying it's not the greatest matchup for him specifically. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he kind of ruins that 15-point streak of he's basically scored 15 points every single game this year. I think there's been 2 that he hasn't. Wouldn't be shocked if it was 3 this week. Different guy that I've loved talking about this week with the trade, Rashid Shaheed going to Seattle. I love it. If you're a Seahawks fan, love this. He was a wide receiver 2 in fantasy, wide receiver 22 in his 6 games last year when Kubiak was his coach, the same play caller. You are just kind of banking on the big play here because I'm guessing his snap rate isn't going to be too high. Just he's been practicing for 2 days with the Seahawks. So wouldn't expect too much there. You are just banking on that big play. So maybe as a deep post, against quarters, which the Cardinals run most in the NFL. If you haven't heard, you can't throw deep against quarters. So maybe that happens. But that's kind of what you're banking on. The Cardinals, they haven't allowed too many explosive pass plays on the season in general here. Let's go to DeVonta Smith versus Green Bay. And I'll talk about A.J. Brown here too. If A.J. Brown does play, I like him better of the two against the outside. You see they're 24th against receivers this year. But the slot guy, which is where Smith is, 61% of the time this year, has Javon Bullard, who's basically by himself made the wide receiver alignment on the inside the sixth worst. So not the greatest matchup for DeVonta Smith out of the slot. He'll get on the outside as well too. He's a versatile receiver, but Bullard only a 14% target share allowed this year. So the volume is going to be key here because as you see, like they're number one against those explosive pass plays. This is a really good defense in general. So if A.J. Brown is out, it gets me a lot more confidence because then we can see that volume day for Smith. But if A.J. Brown is in, I would rather take the shot on A.J. Brown and rather have him because if they both get, say, 7 targets, 6 targets, then I'd rather bank on A.J. Brown there. I did ask on Twitter for some recommendations on who to look at. And I was surprised when so many people answered Tez Johnson. So let's look at Tez Johnson because it's a good one. So thank you. When we're looking at this matchup, Gonzo got beat by Drake London last week. Wasn't the greatest for him. Drake London was incredible, but he's going to be shadowing Emeka Egbuka. So it definitely helps Tez Johnson a little bit in terms of this matchup. Who New England right now, they're 28th against receivers. So we'll have Marcus Jones on the inside on him when he's playing out of the slot, a little over 50% of the time. And then on the outside, I'll have Carlton Davis because Gonzo is going to be traveling with Egbuka. And you see, like, what's the key that we're looking for with Tez Johnson? If you're taking a flyer on him, you're hoping for that big play. And right now, New England, 4th worst in the NFL in allowing those big plays. So 29th. So it's really good for a receiver there. Overall, pretty good game script for Tez Johnson. So, like, you know what you're playing him for. You're playing him for that big deep shot, that big touchdown, hoping for something to happen there. In this matchup, favors the likelihood of that happening at least. Kind of a similar situation with Quentin Johnston. Sadly, at this point, it's been a lot more of that lately and a lot less consistency or as good of volume. But Pittsburgh, they played amazing last week. It was great. Receivers for the Colts still produced. They're 31st on the outside. They're 31st against receivers in general. The big question for the Chargers is just with 3 offensive tackles out, can they actually protect Herbert? And the big stat for me that sticks out with Justin Herbert this week is when Joe Alt is not playing, his ADOT drops significantly. The second highest in the NFL in terms of throwing deep downfield to then much more conservative. Quarterback 24 in that average depth of target. And that affects, in theory, Johnston the most. He's that downfield threat, that big play guy. So Pittsburgh allows that. Darius Slay hasn't been nearly as good this year in terms of just looking at fantasy points per route. Joey Porter, still good on that opposite side. So it's a good matchup overall against this Pittsburgh defense. He's a fine play, definitely risky. It is more boom bust, but the matchup helps that boom percentage. Just sadly, they don't have Joe Alt. 2 tight ends for you. We're sticking in LA. Gadsden, I've seen a lot of questions on kind of who this helps in terms of Joe Alt being out. My answer is none of them. So I get the idea of like, oh, they'll be pressured more. Does that mean he gets it out to Ladd quicker and Gadsden quicker because they're the tight end and slot guys? And I get that. That makes sense. Herbert, though, is more so an anomaly. He wants to be pushing it downfield, and basically all of these guys, in a way, are downfield targets, especially Gadsden. Like, Ladd maybe benefits, but it more so is like it's not really a negative or positive for Ladd because it's less of those downfield targets, those more valuable targets where he does get to McConkey even out of the slot. Gadsden is similar, where Gadsden top 5 among tight ends in that average depth of the target. Like, he's being targeted downfield, and that's partially why he's been so good. So Pittsburgh, been pretty horrible against tight ends, and pretty consistently as well. Red zone pass defense isn't bad. Looking at the tight ends a little bit different. So we're looking at tight end in general, that fantasy matchup versus split tight ends. So when they are in the slot or out wide, Pittsburgh still 30th, doesn't really change. And then that red zone passing defense, because when we're looking at tight end matchups, what matters more than scoring touchdowns? Those touchdowns, really nothing. So Alt being out does not help Gadsden. He can still be fine. Really good matchup overall. but he is still more boom bust. And I know that he has been booming these last couple of weeks. So I'm just more so cautioning, like I have him. I'm really excited, but I don't think Gadsden is like that top five, top four, three tight end this year. He's going to have his floor games, and that's okay. Fantasy tight ends are extremely volatile. So that's okay. Trust him, but just know that those floor games will eventually happen, especially Joel lowers his ceiling, I would say. And one final quick tight end. Let's look at George Kittle. I've gotten a lot and a lot of start sit questions with George Kittle, which I get because a lot of people found different tight ends. And some of those tight ends that they were replaced with instead are doing better than Kittle, even though he's back. So Kittle's still a top guy, but that volume has been a lot lower, especially with no Purdy. A lot of that is just because of McCaffrey, I would say, in my personal opinion. But even with Mac Jones, like hasn't gotten over 5 targets. So you're banking on those touchdowns against the Rams in the past. I know it's different teams, but last 4 seasons, only 35 yards per game. Right now, that target share sits at 14% with Mac Jones. So I wouldn't say he's like that weekly top 5 guy, and more so like that fringe top 5 guy because of the matchup. The biggest thing for tight ends in general for me, if it isn't like a super obvious, like they are horrible against tight ends or, oh, they're really good against tight ends, is the defense good? And in this case, the Rams defense is really good. So Kittle, he will probably be around my tight end 5 on the rankings this week, but probably at the top of that second tier, I would say. Like I would be much more happy starting Trey McBride, starting Tyler Warren, starting Brock Bowers, those types. He is more so like right above Jake Ferguson range right now. It would be really hard between him and Gadsden. I would go Kittle, honestly, but it would be hard. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. 14 different matchups of the week. So let me know any questions in the comments, and I'll get back to you soon. Thanks. See you soon.